We have new developments going on with the DeAndre Hopkins situation, with trying to figure out where he's going to go. It seems like it's starting to really narrow down for him, as you can see on screen right now, posted on Columbia on Twitter. Update: the Chiefs and Bills are, quote, an arms race for free agent wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. If I had to throw a couple other teams out there too, I would say Cleveland and New England. Cleveland because, of course, Deshaun Watson, the chemistry that they've had. They have the best chemistry out of all these quarterbacks, even though you could, obviously you can make an argument with Allen and Mahomes being better. Obviously, this stems back to their Houston time, where they spent a few seasons together. No doubt they have the best chemistry. Another one too, I'm gonna still throw out there is New England. Not for the quarterback part of it, because I know he said he wants a stable quarterback, and it's obviously out of the four options, it's by far the worst one. I think more so it's a stable team. They're not a horrible team, but no doubt they're a team nonetheless that is really desperate for a number one wide receiver. You look at for the other teams, they have their number one wide receiver. The Chiefs, no doubt, went through this past year without having a bona fide star at number one, but they still won the Super Bowl without one. For the Bills, of course, they have Stephon Diggs at one, and for the Cleveland Browns, they have Cooper Kupp. New England doesn't have that as for right now. They have Juju Smith-Schuster as a number one, just like the quarterback's position, vastly different from the rest of the three. Also, a large part too with the money situation. So if we just kind of put those other two teams aside and just focus on really a hand the Chiefs and Bills, because that's the top two teams that we think is in the one of the two teams that he's going to go to. Let's look at the cap situation. So if we look at Spock Trek, and I'm going to use this as well for the Bills, for 2023, for right now, they are just under $1.1 million for cap space. If we switch over to the Bills, they're not that much better at 1.6. So definitely, both these teams have a lot to work to do. If ultimately they have to pay this $23 million price tag, they're going to have to really restructure and let go of players. Now, in my opinion, I don't believe, if it is true that he's seeking $23 million a year, I don't see this happening. The big thing that's not really going to hurt him is age and injury. Of course, last year injury wasn't a problem with him missing 10 games because of suspension and PED use. I don't see that as a problem moving forward. But outside of that, he has had injury concerns, especially in his time with Arizona, being up there in age at 30. You start to worry as he gets older, of course, is this going to be more common? Perfect example is Julio Jones. As he got older, the injuries started to really rack up, and now he is really a shell of himself of what he used to be just a few years ago. But I mean, if I had to guess a contract, I would say I won't be shocked if he got a deal around Odell Beckham's offer, with incentives upwards of $18 million or $15 million fully guaranteed. I know that's quite a bit down from what supposedly he wants at 23, but he's going to have to make the ultimate decision. Does he want what's more important to him right now? His state of his career, which is closer to the end than it is in the beginning. Is championships worth it to him, or is making the money worth it to him? Because if he's going to join these two teams, he's going to have to sacrifice the money and join these two in order to join either one. And also another one too, Cleveland is a little bit tough in their cap problems as well, so he's going to have to definitely make a deal with them as well. New England, same way too, but I hope that's probably the best chance that he can get the most money from. Other teams I've seen some teams throw out there is, I think one was Carolina, which could definitely be a dark horse for them, seeing that the NFC is very weak and lacking elite talent, elite teams, as opposed to AFC, where it's very stacked, especially in the division where they're in, where every team is really coming off of a rebuild or starting one. With the Falcons, you see could be a perfect opportunity with them taking full advantage of second-year starter Desmond Ridder, but ultimately really kind of a rookie because he only played the last couple of games of the year. You look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which I don't know if you guys saw on today with the video posted, which was showing the Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask throwing at camp. It looks horrible. That team's going to be bad, so you don't have to worry about them. The biggest contender in that division is really just going to be the Saints, in my opinion, with Derek Carr, best quarterback, at least if looking at best quarterback in the division, and definitely have, I think, overall the best chance to win it. Though I will say Carolina isn't that far back. So I can definitely see Carolina being a spot there. No doubt with them having a lot more money than these teams that I've listed. But with that being said, another component of this too is which is the better team? What team is the best fit for DeAndre Hopkins? Now, obviously, you can make the argument for both, but I'm going to start with the Bills because I think personally for me, not just because I'm saying as a Bills fan, I do believe the Bills are a better fit than the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, when you think about that, when you first hear that, it sounds stupid. Honestly, it sounds idiotic. Why would Kansas City not be the number one spot for DeAndre Hopkins? If he wants to win a championship, Chiefs are obviously the pick. They've shown it. They've actually won championships as opposed to Buffalo, who's still trying to get to a appearance. And then to that credit, if you do have that mindset, you're absolutely right. But I kind of really sat back and I thought, really I listened to Nick Wright. Not the biggest fan of him, but he definitely had an interesting point when they were talking about on their segment when they were talking about DeAndre Hopkins. He was saying, I wouldn't be too, kind of paraphrasing. He says, I wouldn't be too excited if they got him because of how much capital investment we've put into younger receivers with this year's draft. Rasheed Rice. You look at last year in the trade deadline, he gave basically a second round pick for Kadarius Toney, and also used a second round pick in Sky Moore. So of course, no doubt with money being tight, they're gonna have to go cheap, and hopefully they can knock on, really strike on these picks and develop them. And the big argument he made against having Hopkins is just stunning the growth of those guys and taking opportunities from them. And to that point, to a certain degree, I do agree with that. As you saw last year, they had no problem whatsoever going to the Super Bowl and winning that. They were without Tyreek Hill, the first season without him, they were still number one in offense. They were number one in yards per game and points per game. And the first season without Hill, what did Patrick Mahomes do? He threw for 5,000 yards the first time since his first time starting or second year in the NFL in 2018. He won NFL regular season MVP and also goes on to win the Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP. So no doubt an unbelievable season by Mahomes and team-wise, statistically. So you think to yourself, why spend that bulk of the money on DeAndre Hopkins when you've proven last year you don't need him? Is it a luxury? Absolutely, it's a luxury. They have that type of caliber player for DeAndre, especially like DeAndre Hopkins. No doubt that would immensely help Kansas City and really make them a tougher team to beat. To pair him up alongside Travis Kelce, who's still the number one tight end in the NFL and will still be that at the end of the season. Why would you want to waste that money? Wouldn't you want to invest that in the defensive side of the ball, which at times has been shoddy, especially with bad at for one of the worst in rankings for points per game and for yards per game? Why would you want to spend that money on DeAndre Hopkins when you should invest in the defense and let Mahomes be Mahomes with that wide receiving group? That's the argument. That's a valid argument against having DeAndre Hopkins with joining Kansas City. But of course, you can make the obvious reason being he's DeAndre Hopkins. Why wouldn't you want him? And I think alongside that too, even though that they did win the Super Bowl last year with this receiving core overall, obviously the biggest departure, if you want to say, in air quotes, is Juju Smith-Schuster. He did have a good season last year, almost 1,000 yards receiving. Definitely contributed well as number one wide receiver. At least in my opinion, I thought he was the number one wide receiver on that team, outside of not counting tight end for Kelce. So it's not a huge void with him going, but definitely if you're comparing wide receiver one this year potentially with Hopkins as opposed to last year, it is a huge upgrade, even with the age and injury concerns. Even though they won the Super Bowl last year with this team, I still just worried that they're still young. I mean, relatively, all these guys are still young. Sky Moore didn't do too much last year outside of his best play of his career in his rookie season with the punt return in the AFC Championship game to help set that up, alongside contributing a touchdown in the Super Bowl to help the Chiefs win that. But overall, I really thought he was going to be a bigger factor on that offense this rookie season, and he wasn't, especially with a second-round pick that they utilized on him. I thought he was going to be heavily utilized, and he wasn't. You can make the argument they wanted to slowly bring him into the lineup, and you have a valid case for that. But to me, it just seemed like I don't know if they just weren't sure yet in his whether it's he felt comfortable in the offense, the playbook, whatever it may be. They didn't want to rush him right away. The other one too is Kadarius Toney. No doubt when he's on the field, he's a very explosive player, but he has injury concerns, ton of injury concerns in his early career. So that's definitely a big factor too that you have to think about that. I know it's kind of hypocritical too because we just talked about Hopkins being, especially the last few years, being injury prone. But I think you still need a guy, a very cornerstone piece like that, if I'm really using the right word like that, but definitely a great talent. I don't know if you would still consider DeAndre Hopkins elite, but no doubt he is still an amazing wide receiver, regardless of all the concerns coming with him. So that's my other the issue with that is Kadarius Toney, once again, immensely talented, but injury concerns. They drafted Rashid Rice. Once again, he could definitely be a big contributor, but if I'm looking at similar to Sky Moore, he might not have a big season this year if I view it the Sky Moore way. So, and also too, some people think that he was a tad bit of a reach for the Chiefs, though at this point, who cares for the Chiefs? I mean, they could probably take any wide receiver and do well. They also have John Ross, which I know he, definitely his claim to fame is just breaking the 40-yard dash. Outside of that, he's done absolutely nothing in the NFL. But he'll be utilized as a gadget player with his speed. He'll probably give you a few plays throughout the whole year. Nothing too crazy. But overall, kind of breaking that down, yes, once again, I keep saying this. I know they won the Super Bowl last year, and they had no problem getting there with being the number one offense last year. But overall, with the big concerns that I have with some of the wide receivers in this group, DeAndre Hopkins gets you a stable number one spot in that. You don't have to worry about him being comfortable in the offense, him being developing, in really understanding his role in this team. You don't have to worry about that. He's been there. He's done that. He's played in big moments. He's obviously thrived in big moments as well, making big plays. You don't have to worry about DeAndre Hopkins. For other people, yes, I get that. Yes, I get that. Ultimately, they did contribute to the ultimate goal, winning Super Bowl. But outside of that, for the most part, for the season, nothing too crazy. They showed flashes, absolutely, and I do believe they will step up and play much better this season in their second year with the team as opposed to their first time, their first year with the Chiefs last year. But overall, I think it gives you a stable piece that you can rely on outside of Travis Kelce. So now going to the Buffalo side, especially as a Bills fan, why do I believe the Bills need DeAndre Hopkins more than the Kansas City Chiefs? I'm very concerned with the wide receiver 2 spot. Yes, we don't have to worry about the number one wide receiver, Stephon Diggs. I think that's I quickly clarify that. That's why I think that would be the best spot is because he's not the number one wide receiver. Now, for the Chiefs, technically he won't be the number one option with Travis Kelce, but looking at just the wide receiving group and just look at the wide receiver group just solely, he is the number one option, and I think he's head and shoulders better than anyone else on the team, skill set wise. For DeAndre Hopkins, he doesn't have to worry about being the number one wide receiver. He has, on the other side of the field, Stephon Diggs, who is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. That's going to take tons of pressure off and give lots of opportunities for Hopkins in one-on-one situations, especially not even mentioning just a tight end position with newly acquired first-round pick Dalton Kincaid and obviously returning tight end Dawson Knox, who just signed a big contract last year. I know the Bills are going to really try and implement a 2 tight end set and really try to utilize Kincaid, unless they want to use him more of as a slot, kind of a slot position, and also so they want to utilize him more as a how the Chiefs use Travis Kelce. Sorry, kind of talking a little bit fast. So you look at that and you think, why wouldn't DeAndre Hopkins want to be on this team where he doesn't have to worry about being the guy? Even if you factor Travis Kelce in, overall, the Chiefs don't have a Stephon Diggs on their team at the wide receiver position. They don't. And I think that's a big part why the Bills would be a much better option. He'd be the number 2 wide receiver here. And definitely if he comes to Buffalo, he is by far the best wide receiver 2 in the NFL. You could throw people out there like, of course, Jamar Chase or T. Higgins from Cincinnati and maybe a couple other people. But Is his skill set wise, as a proven wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins would be by far the best number 2 wide receiver in the NFL and would immensely help Josh Allen and help the Bills to their ultimate goal of getting to, and more importantly, winning a Super Bowl. So that's the biggest reason. And if I going back to the wide receiver too, last year was very concerning with that spot with Gabe Davis, who when we saw in bits and pieces throughout his early career, he showed up. He made big plays in the very little moments that he was given, especially in the 13-second game where he had over 200 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. We thought he was going to be an amazing player, being full time at that second wide receiver 2 spot. I thought he was going to be well over 1,000 yards receiving. This past year, he had over 800 yards. And if you look at it, it's not horrible, and you kind of question why are people complaining about Gabe Davis. He was very inconsistent this year, especially if you watched him every single week throughout the whole season. Very inconsistent. Only had one 100-yard season or game in the 2022 season. That came in the Steelers game where he had over 150 yards receiving. Outside of that, a no-show at times. Vastly different. Catching wise for percentage, I think he was around the 50% range. Not good whatsoever. So DeAndre Hopkins gets you a reliable wide receiver 2. You don't have to worry about catching concerns. You don't have to worry about him disappearing in games like Gabe Davis. That gives you a stable spot on the other side across from Stephon Diggs. Another 2 is a slot position. I know I just mentioned Dalton Kincaid. They'll use him a little bit in the slot. Isaiah McKenzie was another big disappointment this one. In 2021, he stepped up big towards the end when Cole Beasley was out for COVID reasons. Also, I think 2-part injury as well. His big game was the Patriots one, where he had over 10 catches, over 100 yards. He was making big catches in that game. And after wrapping up the 2021 season, the heartbreak, for myself especially, alongside Gabe Davis, I had high expectations for Isaiah McKenzie, especially what the flashes that he's shown, mainly just being a gadget guy for his time in Buffalo. Him stepping in a full-time role, basically in the slot position, I thought was going to be a huge upgrade at that spot, giving the speed necessary. Outside of Cole Beasley, who was a possession guy, wasn't a threat to really get a ton of yards after run. Isaiah McKenzie could do that. He was a big disappointment, dropping catches, slipping, just very inconsistent for the most part. So no doubt DeAndre Hopkins solves that problem with that. Now, what's the downside of the Bills getting DeAndre Hopkins? Same reason as the Chiefs, money-wise. They don't have the money to pay DeAndre Hopkins, and especially if you want to keep pieces on the defense, coming out the defensive line, we don't have anyone else signed going into in the 2024 season. Ed Oliver this is his final year of his deal. If he plays well, we were probably potentially going to have to give him a contract extension if we choose to. There's also other players coming up as well. Gabe Davis is one as well. If he has a bounce back year and he really improves from last year, he's probably gonna get payday as well. If Buffalo wants to decide to keep him, he's definitely gonna get a ton of money, or asking a ton of money. And there's other few positions out there as well. Of course, eventually in the next year or two, they're going to have to say let go of players. Poyer and Hyde are probably coming up very soon. Poyer signed a 2-year deal. He'll most likely just finish out his contract. Well, basically finish out his contract and retire. Hyde, I don't know what the question's going to be there. So you also have concerns with them, and also other players on the team with contracts as well. Another thing too is I'm very high on Khalil Shakir. I'm sure if you're not a Bills fan or outside obviously Bills Mafia, you hear that name, you probably don't know who that is. He was a 5th-round pick last year, or in the 2022 draft. And same thing like Gabe Davis, it could be deja vu, I could be fooled again. But in his small moments he played amazing. He caught almost every pass. He was making difficult catches here and there, in big moments. And I was very upset that Sean McDermott chose Isaiah McKenzie over Shakir. And I think they really need to give Shakir a chance. If you're going to give Gabe Davis a chance, with him, really succeeding and thriving in the very little opportunities he has, and you're saying we trust you as the wide receiver too, I think you need to do the same with Khalil Shakir. give him the opportunity at the slot. I know they'll probably bounce back and forth between him and Kincaid, but I do think you need to give Khalil Shakir a shot. For Hopkins, again, I think it mostly just comes down to money, really, for the Bills' problem. I don't have a concern with stunning the growth of wide receivers. There's the other ones that we've signed on the team with outside of Shakir. I gotta look this up right now. There was a Saints wide receiver that we signed, a Hyatt, a 5'6" wide receiver, which I'm not too impressed with whatsoever. I know he was for special teams, but we already have Naeem Hines, which basically filled that role. Yeah, Deontay Hardy. My apologies. That's his name from the Saints. Gave him a 3-year deal. Nothing too special, even with his size. He's not going to be a big impact at 5'6". We have Keyshawn Johnson. Trent Sherfield, which didn't do too much with Miami last year. Justin Shorter, which was a 5th-round pick this past year's draft. He has major upside, being 6'4", close to 230, but injury problems as well. So it really boils down to just the problem is just money, and basically for both these teams is just the money problem. $23 million, even if he cuts down to $15 to $18 million, it's still a lot for both these teams unless they're willing to, either one of these teams are willing to somehow find, move money around and open cap space up for DeAndre Hopkins. It's going to be very difficult. And another question is, too, how much money, for year-wise, how many years does he want? Does he want just a 1-year deal? Does he want a long-term deal, like a 3-year deal? What is the length he's willing to stay with the team? And that's also going to contribute that as well. Because if he's going to be asking for around that range every single year, yes, most likely he'll probably just be a 1-year option because teams are probably not going to be able to afford him. And with his getting up there in age as well, he is clearly a cut candidate, as the Cardinals have shown. Now they're in a rebuild, and they'll probably be a bad team this year, in my opinion, with letting go of DeAndre Hopkins. But they want to move on. I'm sure it's a ton of money that he was. Well, the previous contract before he got cut, he was, of course, demanding a lot. Well, not demanding, but he was getting a ton of money. He was getting close to, if not over, $30 million this year. So no doubt that's immensely big on the cap. And once again, even with him being cut, he's still, rumored-wise, still asking for a ton at $23 million, if that is the case. And once again, if he even drops down to that Odell Beckham type of contract, I think it's still going to be difficult for either one of these teams to really fit him under the cap, fit him in the team. And that's where I think coming into this, I think there might be a third option, whether that's what I said, Cleveland with Deshaun Watson. I know they have cap problems as well, especially with Deshaun Watson's fully guaranteed contract, along with a couple other people on the team, with Amari Cooper and Myles Garrett. I did mention the Patriots. Once again, I know it's not a... You look at the quarterback position, it's probably by far the worst one out of the 5 options I mentioned, but it's still a stable organization, not, the New England Patriots of the Tom Brady era, but still not a horrible team. That's probably a good chance where you can get the money as well, or at least close to that money, and be the number 1 option for New England. And the 5th one I mentioned as well was the Carolina Panthers with a rookie Bryce Young, and of course with them much more money than all these other teams have. At least I do believe for New England, no doubt more money than what the Bills, Chiefs, and Browns have. So no doubt that could be a good option there. They've already surrounded him with a ton of talent with Thielen and a few others, so that could definitely be another option. But I'm gonna kind of wrap it up here. It's a little bit of longer video, but kind of just want to discuss mainly between the Bills and Chiefs, which is the better option, the better fit in my opinion. Kind of just to sum it up once again quickly, I think the better choice for him is the Buffalo. Just if you want to take it, even with the money concerns, he doesn't have to be the number 1 guy at the wide receiver position. He has a Stephon Diggs on the other side of him, and that's really going to take tons of pressure off of him and open things up. So I do believe overall, I would slightly lean toward Buffalo being the better option just because of that. But of course, in terms of success-wise and championship-wise, you got me on that. The Chiefs have shown and proven that with 2 Super Bowl wins. But let me know your thoughts down below where you do believe DeAndre Hopkins will end up. Will it be the Bills, Chiefs, or be a third option that no one's mentioning, or at least a team that I haven't mentioned in this video? Let me down below. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.